Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrew Aldous Olson, and I'm the Program Director International at Mid-Atlantic Arts. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a white man with short blonde hair. I have round brown glasses, and I'm wearing a brown sweater and button-up shirt. Today, we're here for the Mid-Atlantic Tours Presenter Webinar and Artist Share. We're going to start out the call today covering the very basics of the grant program before shifting to the Artist Share portion of the call. Once we've heard about the two Mid-Atlantic Tours artists this year, I'll then do a deeper dive into the grant program process for any that want to stay on for this refresher of how the program works. There have not been significant changes to the structure of the program since last year. So this webinar is meant to serve as an overview and a resource. Before being in touch with a roster tour agent, though, I do strongly encourage you to review the Mid-Atlantic Tours guidelines, which are available at midatlanticarts.org. You can reach out to me with questions about the guidelines at any time. In addition, I just want to share that captions are available using the captions button on the Zoom menu. And throughout your Mid-Atlantic Tours process, if you're in need of accommodations, please contact me or Sarah Lewis, our accessibility coordinator, at 410-539-6656, extension 110, or at her email address up on the screen. So today, we'll just briefly cover Mid-Atlantic Tours, have that important time learning about these roster artists, and then go into the eligibility requirements, how the program is structured, and kind of the important dates before opening it up to any final questions at the end. So let's quickly learn about Mid-Atlantic Tours. Mid-Atlantic Tours is a program of Mid-Atlantic Arts that is designed to support tours of artists from a roster program through our region, specifically within our geographic region on the East Coast, which is described up on this slide. And this program is funded with support from the National Endowment for the Arts. The program supports engagements that take place between September 1st, 2026 and December 31st of 2027. So we are slightly shifting the touring period for the program this year and actually extending it and making it longer, about a year and 3 months of possible touring periods. Presenters interested in receiving a Mid-Atlantic Tours grant must contract a roster artist for performance and engagement activity during that window of time to be considered for support. And grant support can be up to 50% of the artist fee. Before we talk about the process for engaging a roster artist, I want to let you know how the roster was selected. International artists are selected through an application process. Artists from 13 countries across Ibero-America, so that's Spain and Portugal, and then several countries throughout Central and South America, apply to our partner, Ibermusicas, to be considered for the touring roster. These artists need to have a manager in their home country, someone working in the US as their booking agent, and invitation letters from 2 Mid-Atlantic nonprofit venues. 2 ensembles were selected from the eligible applicants, and each group receives $5,000 from Ibermusicas to help cover visa expenses. As those visa expenses, I'm sure you know, are one of the greatest hurdles keeping international artists from performing in the US. So here are the international roster artists that were selected this year: Las Áñez from Colombia and Fabiana Cozza from Brazil. Additional information about these artists is available at our website, but today you're lucky enough to have Fabiana and her agent Michael here on the call to share a bit about themselves, as well as Justine Biodispose, who's the agent for Las Áñez. Let me just admit a few additional folks in the waiting room, and then Justine, why don't you unmute? I'll pin you, and then we can get started with discussion on Las Áñez.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be speaking about Las Áñez. And I have been part of Iberomusica's touring before, and I'm always happy when I get to bring to this program amazing female artists. Female artists are super underrepresented, and at Torito Arts, my organization, we are really trying to shine a spotlight on the contribution of women to all kinds of music, all genres of music. And speaking of genre, Las Áñez are they are both traditional and non-traditional artists. Very much their sound is dedicated to capturing traditional musics from across Colombia. They are from Bogota, from the capital, but they take influence from different traditional musics, and that's definitely audible in their songs. They do create their own songs, but they are inspired by these traditions. But they're bringing that traditional music into the contemporary by fusing in this aspect of pedals and loops. So both they're twins, by the way. They are twins. You are not seeing double. Juanita and Valentina use their voice as their primary instrument, but they use loops and pedals to create a sort of more dynamic approach to their music, in addition to including several small instruments, many of which are traditional to traditional Colombian music. So, for example, in addition to their voices, they use the cuatro, they use a caja chayera, which is a type of hand drum. They use a mini korg, so we have the aspect of the piano in there as well. And they also use different kinds of whistles and shakers. So even though it's just two people on stage, with two tech in the background. So we have a sound person as well as a lighting person, also to give that live in person performance some dynamism with the lights. They are a very full concert. Don't be thrown off by just two people on stage. And their voices are absolutely spectacular. The way that they sing together is beautiful and enchanting. And I think that Andrew has a video that you'll get that feeling from.
Yeah, let's start that clip. With the caveat that watching a work sample over Zoom is like the worst experience one can have. So please go check these videos yourself on your own computer where it won't be stuttering quite so much. Um,
Si tu mirada fuera más honda y atravesara mi pecho, no habría pedazo de piel que esconda si adivinaras mis miedos, si de todo el peso de la historia liberaras tu ego, yo te diría lo que anhelo. Si preguntaras qué planes tengo y no los dieras por hecho, si no sintieras que tú me alzas, sino que andamos al tiempo, si mis talentos los mencionaras omitiendo mi aspecto, yo te diría lo que anhelo, que se acabara la lenta lucha de ser quien soy en mi curvo cuerpo y que mi petición no sea mucha, que tu cariño sea el más sincero. No quiero ser una diosa ni depender de mi cuerpo, no quiero ser una santa, yo quiero ser lo que...
all right, I think we'll cut it there. Justine, back over to you.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that for Spanish speakers, the lyrics are extremely poetic, but also speak about a lot of important issues, a lot of real issues, a lot of feminist issues. This song that you just heard is called Curvo Cuerpo, and it is about women not being defined by what is seen on the outside, but who they are and what they contribute. But it's done in this extremely poetic way, essentially saying, I don't want you to treat me like a goddess. I don't want you to see me for what's on the outside. I want you to take me for who I am, right? For who I am, not what I am. I think for Spanish speakers as well, there's that that also that added benefit of having this really poetic, really beautiful, very contemporary aspect to what they're discussing in their songs. And I have to throw out there, if any of you are familiar with Latin American pop stars who have made it big in the US, Juanes, who is a massive Colombian pop artist who also works in the US and is very well known here amongst Latino audiences. When he heard, I believe it was their second album, was just absolutely blown away by them. People who are in the know in working in Latin American music know these women and are amazed by how much they do with very little. And so I don't know if anybody, Andrew, do we want to open it up to any questions specifically?
Yeah, happy to open up for some quick questions from folks on the call. Just raise your hand if you have a question. Also, Justine, yeah, just wondering if you too can maybe set up some ideas around community engagement. That's always
Yes.
something that folks can discuss with you and the artists and create something that really works
Right.
for your venue specifically and what you've got. But if you have a couple ideas that you could share, that'd be great.
Sure. So what the women very specifically talked about when we were discussing this is that they would like to do a workshop on creating music with just two voices. And if there is the ability to work with the electronic side of it, they could also include the looping aspect in there. But if it's just a very simple workshop, we can just do creating music with two voices. And again, I know with a lot of younger musicians and young people, the aspect of being able to loop is really interesting and exciting. A lot of younger artists are using the loops quite a bit. So that's also a really nice way to offer community engagement. Overall, though, the artists tend to be pretty flexible. We can do different things as long as they're discussed, obviously, in advance. I personally love being able to do things with schools and colleges. Uh, this is young people music. This is meant to be tradition made palatable to younger audiences. So it's really great to get these artists into a room with young people.
Thanks, Justine. And Ellen, I see your hand. Why don't you go ahead with your question?
Yeah, thank you. And actually, Justine just touched on it for a second. I was curious if they have experience doing school programming, and if so, at what age range would that be looking at? And do they have a study guide?
I'm not sure if they have a study guide. My guess is that they do not.
Hmm.
And I don't know the age range that they have worked with, but I do know that they have done these kinds of workshops in the past. I can definitely ask them. Unfortunately, they weren't able to be here today because they are doing a listening session in Bogota right now. But I can ask, and that's all. We can discuss that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And just one final question. Do they give
Sure.
their workshops in English or in Spanish or bilingual?
So we can definitely do it bilingual. I tour with the artists. I am fully bilingual.
Hmm.
So even when artists don't speak English, I can translate for them. I know that they do speak a little bit of English. I'm not sure if the English is enough to lead a full workshop, but I am absolutely there to translate if they need it.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Right. Any other questions before we move on? Just take a look. I don't see any other hands. So thank you, Justine. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing about Las Áñez. And that will take us to Fabiana. So let me just add a pin here for Michael Grafsorian and Fabiana. We're so glad that you could join us today. So why don't you both come off mute?
Great to be here.
Great. All right, take it away.
So, Fabiana, maybe the way to begin is for you to tell people who you are.
Hi, I don't like to start never, but I'll do it now, okay, Michael, for you and for all presenters here. Thanks for the invitation, Andrew, and all presenters. Thanks, Michael, to be here with me. I'm Fabiana Cozza. I am a Brazilian singer. I was born in São Paulo. My dad is a singer, but it's an accountant too, and my mom is a teacher. I would like to tell you that my education is, I had a formal education in school, graduation, etc. But samba is part of this, and it's very important to. I'd like to share that when I talk about samba, I'm not talking just about a musical genre, but I'm talking about a genre that is bigger than music. It's a philosophy, it's a way of being, it's a way of communicate, and it's part of my ethic in the world, you know. So I've been singing for almost 30 years, and here in Brazil nowadays I am known by critics and audience as one of the representatives of this classic samba in contemporary times. Classic not as something that is fixed in the past, but it's the opposite. Yeah, a music that has resisted for more than 100 years, sorry, and it is still going ahead with new people, new composers, new singers, new musicians, and of course, joining and mixing the classical way of play samba in most part of Brazil with new genres. For example, the funk, the soul, R&B, etc., etc. I am a singer, but I'm almost a teacher. I am almost an actress. And in parallel of my performances, I've been teaching. I'm finishing my PhD that is inspired in a methodology that I've been developing with singers and non-singers, but people who want to investigate itself through music, through song, and especially through the Afro-Brazilian songs. That is my specialization, I can say. So we would like to offer to you, of course, the concert that is very beautiful about all things I'm talking about, but even a workshop for singers and non-singers. As I told you, this workshop has been is part of my PhD, and I've been developing it around the world, in Paris, in Barcelona, in Madrid, in Israel, Tel Aviv, in Colombia, and and in Brazil, of course. When I teach in Brazil, always in Portuguese, but abroad, it depends on the case, but generally in English, in Spanish, that is my second language, and sometimes in French. So I think that as I talk it so much, I think that it's good to stop and then maybe 2 or 4 minutes to Michael.
Okay.
I'm very glad to be here. Thank you so much.
I think it might be a good time to play a little bit of the video, and
Yes.
then I'll add a few thoughts.
Vocês.
Emorio deve ser uma palavra na go, uma palavra de amor, um paladar. Emorio deve ser alguma coisa de lá, o sol, a lua, o céu de Oxalá. Emoipao, Emorio, Moipao, Emorio. Emorio deve ser uma palavra nago, uma palavra de amor, um paladar. Emorio deve ser alguma coisa de lá, o sol, a lua, o céu de Oxalá. Emoipao, Emoipao, Emoipao.
All right, and we'll pause that right there.
Sure.
Bob.
So,
It was the best part. It would be the best part.
Oh no.
well, the video is available for everyone to hear. So, I'd like to add a few things to what Fabiana said, and she can correct me and elaborate as it comes to her. She grew up in this music. Her father was, as she said, and this is a lot of people in Brazil, this is the story. They have a career as a dentist or an accountant or something, but they're also musicians, and they're free as musicians to do what they want to do. And so her father is a Afro-Brazilian man, and she just is from a childhood, just grew up with him singing in his samba group. So she knows it that way from the beginning. And she also, when we were discussing things for this tour, and explaining to me how samba is just more than a genre, I asked her, I said, is it like flamenco? Where, in flamenco, it's a music, but it's a lot more than just the music. And she said, exactly. That's exactly what's going on. And so if that, hopefully that analogy is of some help to people. For the U.S. tour, of course, she's well known in Brazil and appreciated. And but we understand that for a U.S. audience, they won't know all her songs. They won't know her 9 albums and so forth. So we're going to be careful to think about speaking to a U.S. audience. I think the step from for an American, a U.S. audience into her music will not be at all difficult. In fact, because of the African diaspora, which came to the entire New World, those people led to jazz, ragtime, and blues in the United States. But at the exact same time in South America and in Brazil, Africans were then leading the development of Brazilian music. So the music of the United States that we all have grown up with and Brazil, they're really brother and sister. So my experience is that it's a very easy step for U.S. audiences. It just makes sense when they hear the kind of thing you just heard. And I think if maybe a concise way to say it, and of course I'm always thinking about what does the website text say? What do the brochure text say? How do you make things concise? But I think the thought behind it, one of the thoughts I have behind it is if you made an entry in a dictionary for Brazilian singer, you couldn't do much better than a video of Fabiana. It would be a good choice. But I think also she brings to the concerts and to her workshops a very complete knowledge of samba. Samba is, she explained to me, is the soul of communities. But Brazil is a very large place. It's the size of Canada. Second only to the United States in geographic size. So there's a tremendous diversity in Brazil. and therefore diversity in communities. And these communities have their sambas, and she knows about them all. So what you get from Fabiana is not just a sensuous, beautiful, exciting concert, but you get somebody who brings the real knowledge of where the stuff comes from and what it means, what the significance of the songs are. So there's multiple layers going on in her concert that people can take in. As far as the workshops go, I had the good fortune of working with Eloisa Fernandes, a pianist from Brazil. We toured on the Eber exchange program earlier this year. So I've learned through that tour. I was on tour with Eloisa that there are different circumstances with each presenter as far as community engagement is concerned, and we have to do different things in different places. So just know that part of my assignment, my job, is to communicate with presenters, find out what are the circumstances, what works, and then work with the artist, in this case, Fabiana, to fashion something that fits and works well for you. So just know that there's energy coming from me to make sure that that part of it is successful for our engagement with you.
And I would just add that I know Fabiana has a few video recordings of some of those voice workshops that she was talking about specifically. So if that is something that might be a good fit for your specific city or community, like there are some videos that you can watch in Portuguese, I believe, but you'll still get the gist of what's going on and see if that might be a good fit, or if you want to, talk about some other type of community engagement work.
Sure. Anything I left out, Fabiana?
No, no,
Okay.
I have many things to tell you, but I won't do that. I will be very.
All right. Well, then we do have just a few minutes here. If anyone has questions specifically for Michael or Fabiana before they leave us. All right. Hearing none. You both are welcome to leave, Justine as well. This is where we switch to the much less interesting nuts and bolts of the grant process. So apologies to everyone who sticks around. I'm not going to be as charming as Fabiana or as interesting as the things that we just were able to see. Let me just remove some pins here. I like to be the center of attention myself, so I've got to take your pin away, Michael. There we go. So first we need to take a look at eligibility. I'm pretty sure most folks, if not all folks who are on the call today, are eligible for this program already, but it's good just to touch base on it. So to be eligible for Mid-Atlantic Tours, you need to be based within our geographic region. You need to be a 501c3 nonprofit, unit of state or local government, or a federally recognized Indian tribal government, and you have to be able to demonstrate organizational administrative capacity. You also have to be in good standing with Mid-Atlantic Arts, meaning you've signed any contracts with us that you need to sign, and you've submitted any final reports that are due. If there are some overdue reports, we'll make sure to remind you so that we can get those wrapped up. Additionally, we do have a fairly expansive definition of a presenter for this program. Maybe you're not a performing arts center or a venue that is bringing in artists every single week. That's okay, so long as you still fit within this kind of broader definition, you could still be eligible for this program. If you have questions, happy to set up a specific call with you and discuss how presenting one of these artists might fit within your work. Presenters also do not need to have a history of engaging professional touring artists. However, organizations without a history will need to describe their administrative plan for engaging the artist within their existing staff structure, and among other organizational priorities. So how is the program structured? Here are the steps. It's really not that much different from your typical booking structure. You will reach out directly to agents, either Justine or Michael, to discuss the artists that you're interested in booking. You'll talk and negotiate the terms of the engagement with the agent, discussing the amount of grant support, that really would be necessary to help make the engagement happen, discussing that community engagement activity. And then you need to submit a signed letter of invitation or an offer letter to the agent by March 23rd. That is the final end date. I would recommend submitting offer letters as soon as you've confirmed details with the agent, so that you are locked in on the tour, as funding is limited for these tours. So those tour agents then make funding recommendations to Mid-Atlantic Arts. We take those recommendations and then we'll send to you an intent to award notice. Hey, we understand you're booking X artist on this date for this artist fee. Here's the grant amount that we intend to award. You'll then be asked to fill out a short grant form in April of 2026. And we'll take the information that you submit in that form and put it in front of our board of directors for final confirmation. And those grants should formally be awarded in July 2026. And then the touring, of course, would take place during the tour timeline, sometime between September of 2026 and December of 2027. So engagement activities. We talked about some of the options a little bit earlier. This is something that you can work together with the agent and the artist to craft your space. They have some ideas already that you can certainly pick up and run with, but if those don't seem like a strong fit, know that you can, of course, talk about what would be of interest. So the program technically requires just 2 engagement activities, one of which must include a performance or performative component of at least 30 minutes that is open to the public. This can be ticketed or free, and the performance can be repeated multiple times during the engagement or just performed one time. Most folks have a public performance as one engagement and then a more community-oriented, smaller engagement activity like a masterclass, rhythm workshop, voice workshop, or panel discussion as the second activity. But if your organization is doing and is more focused on community engagement work rather than strictly performances, it is possible to have 2 kind of community engagement oriented works where one of them does include more of a performative element. So the potential grant award for Mid-Atlantic Tours is dependent on recommendations from the tour agent. I want to stress that what is outlined here is the maximum that any presenter may receive for the support of one artist on the tour roster. Tour agents may not be able to recommend all venues for the full grant amount, depending on how they're structuring the tour and the level of interest that they receive. So the maximum grant award is made up of 2 components. A fee subsidy of up to 50% of the artist fee that gets paid out to you, the presenter, and then the possibility of support for other eligible expenses like marketing, your staff time, if you are booking hotels for the group. So the fee subsidy compensation for a presenter is a maximum of 50% of the artist fee. And the other eligible expenses are up to $2,000 maximum. So if you are talking to an agent for an engagement with an artist fee of $8,000, you could get a maximum of $4,000 from Mid-Atlantic to support the artist fee. That's your 50%. And then if negotiated with the tour manager, if they were able to provide additional support for that engagement, you could potentially get up to $2,000 additional for backline support, marketing, etc. But that is something that will need to be discussed. Tour agents may recommend a lower percentage than 50% if they are working to distribute their funds across a larger tour, if there's a lot of interest. So please be patient with the tour agents. I encourage you to be clear about what you really need to make an engagement work, but know that they're coordinating with a lot of presenters to try and make the broader tour work for everybody. So they may need to get back to you with their specific recommendation. Also, please keep in mind that tour agents do not make final grant award offers. That does come from Mid-Atlantic Arts. Like most federally funded grants do need to be matched on a one-to-one basis. We kind of build this in since the grant is only up to 50% of the artist fee. So long as you're using non-federal funds to pay the other portion to the artist, you'll have met your match. I just want to make sure to mention that as a requirement. Similarly, we don't allow any indirect expenses with this grant. And if you were to use any of the grant funds to purchase flights, know that they would have to be Fly America Act compliant. If you want to have a conversation about that, happy to do so. I love talking about the Fly America Act. So just some funding priorities. We have asked the tour agents to keep the following kind of funding priorities in mind. Encouraging that, we have geographic breadth for each tour. So we are distributing grant funds through our geographic region, that they consider bringing artists to small and mid-sized presenters serving rural communities, and presenters whose engagement activities align with the roster artist goal as well, just to make sure that both sides are getting something from this relationship. So the letter of agreement that needs to be submitted no later than March 23rd needs to include all of the information that we have listed here on the slide. So nothing too out of the ordinary here. Something that is relatively new is the mutual statement on accessibility planning for the engagement. And so we're just going to talk a little bit more about that. This statement should describe the plans surrounding accessibility for the engagement. Since these funds are from the National Endowment for the Arts, all grantees must comply with ADA requirements. So your statement can be as direct as acknowledging that you and the roster artist will collaborate to ensure all ADA requirements are met for all engagement activities. Or maybe this leads you to think about, how you can make the show more accessible in a broader way. Lay out a few bullet points describing the types of accessibility measures you'll be putting in place for the Mid-Atlantic Tour supported engagement. These are just some examples. Your plan, can certainly look different than this. Maybe it's providing a QR code to some translated lyrics for those very poetic lyrics that Las Áñez are singing that Justine was talking about, so that folks who don't speak Spanish can still follow along and really hear and understand the full content of those songs instead of just the kind of natural beauty of the singing. Another option would be to lay out a portion of the budget specifically reserved for accessibility if that's applicable for your project. I want to emphasize that our funding amount will not vary based on how fleshed out your accessibility statement is. However, if you and the roster artist choose to direct some of the other eligible support funds toward accessibility, that is permissible as long as it's a direct project expense. The purpose of including this requirement in the letter, just to have an accessibility statement, is really to encourage having a discussion on accessibility measures early in the engagement planning rather than waiting until later in the process when it may be too late to budget or plan effectively. And again, I'm happy to meet with you and talk through any questions you might have about an accessibility statement. I do see that Ellen wants me to talk about the Fly America Act. So Ellen, I'm happy to briefly just say that basically anytime you're using federal funds to pay for flights, there's this law called the Fly America Act that requires that the flight be on an American carrier. And that it be, you're not choosing the more expensive option. So typically it doesn't come into play much with this grant because artists are not flying in between, venues on the East Coast, since we're all so closely connected that there are many other easier and cheaper ways to travel. But if you were planning on using grant funds from the federal government, you would need to make sure that it was on an American carrier. This really comes into play more when folks are buying international flights because there's a lot more options. But like, if for some reason there was a flight from New York to DC on Air Canada, you wouldn't be able to use federal funds to purchase that flight. Okay, so the application process, we do really try and keep this process simple for this program because we know that it's, we're looking at smaller grant amounts. This isn't a $10, $15, or $20,000 grant. So typically, and so we want to make sure that the grant work related to it is commensurate with the grant that you're getting. So if you have submitted that letter to the agent by the deadline and confirmed that you're going to be part of the tour prior to those funds being committed, fully committed, then we'll notify you in April of the grant form. And really there's just 3 sections for you to fill out: a letter of agreement, a narrative section, and a budget. So you will just be re-uploading into our grant portal at smartsimple.com that same letter that you submitted to the agent, or if you've gone to contract already, you can also submit the contract. And then there are 2 narrative questions that you'll need to address. Last, that you describe that planned community engagement activity. I don't want you to feel too locked in. I know typically you're filling out this grant form 6 to 10 months in advance of the actual performance. So know that if plans change around the community engagement activity, that's okay. You could just send us an email and say, hey, look, we're pivoting to do this instead. If it's a minor change, we don't care. But we do want to make sure that there has been some thought put into what the community engagement activity will be, so you can work with a tour agent to get some language around what to include here. And then there'll be the second question is up on the screen as well. What are the barriers of participation for your organization's audiences, artists, and staff, and how are you going to address those barriers? So there's a lot of different ways you can answer that question. Right, maybe you're bringing in an artist that speaks Spanish or Portuguese and your audience doesn't have necessarily, the majority of your audience doesn't have fluency in those languages. So there might be ways you can build in additional accessibility for those audiences. Maybe you're working on other ways to make sure that your building is ADA compliant, et cetera. There's a lot of different ways that you can respond to that question. And then the third component of the application process is the budget. If you are just getting grant support for the artist fee, it's super, super simple. You're literally just typing in the artist fee into the form. If you are getting additional support beyond the artist fee, which again may not be possible this year, depending on how things go, then you will need to fill out a full project budget, just listing marketing, staff, et cetera, other expected expenses for the program. If awarded, 100% of the presenter grant will be released at the beginning of the grant period. So at least 30 days prior to the first engagement activity. And that will happen, pretty seamlessly so long as the grant award agreement has been fully signed by you. And we do require that you upload a countersigned contract with the artist before we distribute those funds. So as soon as you do get that contract signed, make sure to upload that contract to the portal. A final report is also required after the engagement takes place. You're able to look at that final report as soon as we award the grant to you, so you will know upfront, what information you need to prepare to submit in that final report. All right, we are getting to the end here, so if you have any questions, start thinking about those. So the important dates. Booking deadline is March 23rd, 2026. So go out, talk to the agents, discuss, when you'd want to be bringing these artists to your venue, those community engagements, et cetera. On the artist slides earlier, I know we had specific time frames, but if you really want to bring an artist in a different time of year, mention it to the agent. Maybe another leg of the tour ends up coming together. It's hard to say. We will invite you to fill out an application in April of 2026. You'll have 2 to 3 weeks to fill that out. And then we will formally award these notifications. We're planning on in July of 2026. So that's really the structure. The idea is that, this isn't really a competitive grant, apart from the fact that it is kind of first come, first serve, based on the limited amount of funds. So you shouldn't really be in doubt about the status of a grant throughout this process, even though we're not formally awarding until July. So that is the timeline, and that brings us to the end of the more boring half of this webinar. Any questions that I can address for folks that are on the call? Ariana?
Hi, I have a question about the agent portion.
Yeah.
We're doing a project in Baltimore. We're bringing a Dutch artist to Baltimore for 3 months to do a mural project. And she's also a DJ. And so she's going to be performing like a community set for the community. Am I, as the nonprofit, the agent, or would she be her own agent? I don't know how that would work.
So Mid-Atlantic Tours, this program specifically provides grants to nonprofit presenters that are booking one of these two artists that we've curated and selected. If you, as a presenter, are bringing in an artist to perform for your community, then you're going to want to look at our Mid-Atlantic Presenter Initiatives grant, which is opening shortly. So let me just make a note. I'll email you a link to that following this call, so that, you have that information. But yeah, I will email that to you shortly, Ariana. Because that Mid-Atlantic Presenter Initiatives is a program where you as a presenter can apply to get support from Mid-Atlantic for bringing in any artist of your choice. Does not have to be artists from a roster, but this program is specifically trying to create sustainable tours for these international artists. All right, Ellen, let's go over to you next.
Thank you very much. So this may be a question for the agents. I mean, would you be anticipating, given that the formal announcement for Mid-Atlantic is not until July, would you be anticipating that perhaps presenters are going to come to you for, I mean, not necessarily for, say, a September, October timeframe because it's so close to the formal notification? Do you have any sense of that at all? Or is it sort of one of these things where everybody kind of knows that the presenter is going to be getting the funding, it's just they don't have a formal letter from Mid-Atlantic? Because that's really tight. Like if you're notified in July and maybe you want to bring the artist in September, early October, you've got 2 months to sell the show.
Absolutely.
Just curious about that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I know Michael with the tour for Fabiana is looking at February of 2027, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Michael.
Oh, got it. I missed that somewhere.
So most of the tours are looking later. I know Las Áñez is looking at an October tour so that would be in the fall, just a few months later, as well as I believe later in 2027 as well. So they've got two different legs that they're trying to put together for their tour. So yeah, it is a bit of a tension there that we're trying to address as well in future years by kind of changing some of our grant making timelines. But basically it boils down to these funds are given out as part of our next fiscal year, actually, which starts July 1. And so we can't officially confirm anything until our new fiscal year. It's one of those unfortunate fiscal timing issues. So yes, that's kind of why I mentioned that the idea is not that you as a presenter would have kind of any concerns through this process, that this isn't competitive. We've sent you in April an intent to award notice. And so the application form is really to confirm compliance with the grant requirements, that you do have an active nonprofit status, et cetera.
Great. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah. And then I see in the chat a question from Pamela. Is any effort made to route the artists geographically? Definitely. I know, Michael, you're still here if you want to say anything about that. The agents are definitely trying to make these tours as succinct, as efficient as possible by routing through our region and then bringing the artist to other parts of the U.S. as well. So, Michael, I don't know, yeah, if you want to share any more on that.
I mean, you've said it well. Obviously, travel costs are a great concern for touring, so we're always trying to be practical about that. I'm also, to Ellen's question, I'm thinking February or April for our tour, depending on presenter needs. But we all know the flow of we're in the heart of booking right now, and we've been there for a little while. So I'm very conscious of the flow of the whole industry, and people do things at different times, some quite early, some a little later, but we're in the heart of it right now. So as a practical matter, need to be in the flow with the whole performing arts cycle, if you will. So, yes, so I'm keen to speak to people as soon as possible if you're interested in Fabiana, because it's really a tremendous puzzle to put it together. It's obvious that people have different needs in each presenter location, and so it's a miracle, frankly, that these tours can be put together at all, considering the diversity of people's needs. So it's my job to understand those needs, to communicate with people, and to put together a good plan. So earlier information is better than later. But I think, again, to Ellen's point, and my cat here now is pressing my computer. Excuse me. We're Andrew and I are talking a lot about interested presenters, and I'm studying the routing a lot. So we're very active on this from now until through January. And I feel like I really want to have the thing put together sooner than later so that everyone has certainty about what we're doing.
It's great to hear, Michael. And sorry to put you on the spot, but will you be at APAP this year if folks want to meet with you in person?
I will be there. I'm not exhibiting, but I'm coming and interested in arranging meetings with people for sure.
And I believe Justine will be at APAP as well. So if you do really like to do business in person, know that you can reach out and connect with either of them in New York as well. I'll be there too, and would be glad to see some of you face to face, see all of you face to face, and catch up. So we are recording. We will send this out to everybody who registered along with the slide deck. Yeah, just want to thank everyone for being here. I don't see any final questions, but I hope this was helpful. And yeah, if you're interested in either of these artists, please reach out to their agents soon and get a conversation going. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks all.